morning. Very nice to see you all here. This is my first time in Oslo. I'm super excited to be here, and it's my first time at Mobile Era. So yeah, my name is Andrea Falcone, and I'm a software engineer. Right now, I'm working at Verily Life Sciences, which is an Alphabet company. It used to be Google Life Sciences, and the path that I took to get there is a bit of a wild one. About 6 years ago, I started working at a very tiny company called Crashlytics. Are people familiar with Crashlytics? Yes, some. Okay, good. And we were acquired by Twitter, and where we built Fabric. We also acquired a tool called Fastlane, which folks may be familiar with as well. So I worked on those things, and we were acquired by Google in 2017. And there I worked on Firebase and Fastlane and Crashlytics. And once I was inside of Google, I used that opportunity about 6 months ago to transfer to Verily, so I could actually be a mobile app developer. Because for my entire career, I had built tools for mobile developers, but this was my opportunity to work on an app for the first time, which was really exciting. So the project I work on at Verily right now hasn't been announced, but what I can say about it is I'm working on an iOS app. So I spent my entire career working on Android tools, and here I am building an iOS app. And I also work on a wearable which communicates over Bluetooth to this app. So I've been working on firmware in C. So I've had a lot of different experiences in the last 6 months, and part of what I'm going to talk about today is sort of the things that I carry with me from my previous experience into this job now, and how I think about things a little bit differently than my team, and I'm trying to help them move faster. So this is kind of a silly question, but would your customers rather get one complete thing or three things that are half done? And when I say half done, I mean 3 buttons that go nowhere, right? Or 3 screens in your app that they can't get to. It seems like kind of an obvious question. And us as developers, would we rather deliver one complete thing or 3 things that are half done, right? But this is not how teams are set up to build things. This is not how engineering managers or project managers think about getting things done. So I'm gonna kind of, I don't know, put this question up on a pedestal and think about it for the entire length of my talk. What is better to do, one whole thing or 3 half-done things? So I'm going to talk about sort of the innovation process, how to launch a first version of your product. And I'll also talk about how you can set up a team, how to arrange things such that people are successful that way. I'll talk about tools, specific tools that you can use to ship mobile apps faster. And I'll talk about something called the progress principle, which is a little bit of a life hack for developers and for managers to get things done more quickly. And finally, I'll close with talking about how to get your customers happier in this iterative kind of way. So I tried to come up with an illustration that was representative of my entire talk. And when I built it, I kind of stood back and I realized it looks like an eyeball staring at you. And I'm sorry that if you didn't see that before, now you will. So we're all going to have this image burned in our minds. But what I wanted to capture is that building any product, there's so much foundational stuff that goes into building it, this big picture, that's really about the product and the customers. And there's a smaller piece about the team, people who are actually doing the building, the process of writing the software. And a tiny piece in the middle, which is the tools, actually how you get things done. And the idea is that the tools don't necessarily matter. The concepts matter, but the tools themselves aren't so important. What's most important is to build the right product, and one that customers love and actually want to use. So we'll talk about the process of launching a product. What does it look like? So getting to V1 is really hard. It's hard because it feels impossible when you're standing at the bottom. There's always unexpected complications. You know, do we believe that when we set out to build something that we can estimate how long it's actually going to take to build the entire thing? Who believes that software estimations are correct and possible? No hands, okay? It's it'll always take longer, or things will take some different amount of time than we expect. And so from where we are to the top, it seems impossible. If you want to ship on some specific timeline, then you end up making painful cuts. You have to remove certain features that you think are important, but just aren't going to make that first revision. And once you're waiting to get everything done, by the time you get there, you're wondering, was the thing that I started building 6 months, a year, 2 years ago, is that even still important to people anymore? How do I know? And the team that's building it, like, can't even see the top, right? From where you are, you can't even picture how far out this first version is, because it's so far away. Tom Stannis, who is the head of software at Verily, he calls the V1, the first launch, this event horizon, right? Because you just can't even see beyond it. It takes up all of the available space. So the idea of a launch can be really, really daunting, trying to line up all these features that you think customers want and get them out for one specific date, one big bang, this big marketing push. But it doesn't have to be that way. And I'm going to try to convince you all that this is really the right way to build things. Our friends working on the web, right? They have the advantage of shipping multiple times a day if they want to. Could we be that lucky in mobile? I don't know. But when we do launch, we can do it again and again. And now is the time when we moan and groan about the overhead of doing App Store and Google Play releases, and it's such a pain, and it's not worth it for this one little bug. But I think we can make that easier. And the reality is that in mobile, we're still shipping software. And we're actually really lucky that we get to, because shipping hardware, we get one chance. I mentioned that the product that I'm working on at Verily, we have a hardware component, right? We get one chance at electrical and manufacturing, like one opportunity. If we get it wrong, that's it. It's gone out to our customers very delicately as such. So to put it into perspective, in mobile, we're actually pretty lucky that we can deliver. So let's think about some ways to make the process of launching the product easier. And how we set up a team, what people do and how they do their work is actually a really important part of that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Kanban and Lean processes, and just generally getting your team to focus on building fewer things instead of many things, and working together to get things done. So Kanban and Lean are two sort of agile methodologies and ways of thinking about engineering. And they apply to lots of kinds of engineering, not just software. Their roots are in manufacturing. And what I like best about these is that they're a set of principles. They're not prescriptive. They're not telling you exactly how to do a thing, but giving you ideas to implement. So the ones that are most meaningful to me, if I were going to pick the points that I would want to run my team using, it's these ones. So a mixture of both. So eliminating waste means removing things from your engineering or development process that aren't necessary. So it's things like partially done work is waste. Things that haven't been delivered to customers yet are waste. Time spent waiting is also waste. Limiting the amount of work in progress. So whatever that means for your team, whether that's the number of features that is happening or the number of people working on those features. And that's also a great way to find waste. If you have 5 people working on one thing, you can really identify where the problems are if people are waiting for each other, or everyone's waiting for something such as CI, waiting for a build to happen. Right? You really feel that when there's 5 people waiting for a thing instead of just one person who might go off and read Twitter or do something else in the meantime. You don't necessarily see that as waste. Delivering things as fast as possible is really, that's the inspiration for this talk, so I want to make sure that it was up here. Feedback loops with your customers and evolving through experimentation mean that you build the right thing for your customers, right? You're learning from the people that you're building these things for, rather than building what you think is the best idea and sending it out. It's getting feedback from the people who will actually use it. And building integrity in, that really means taking the time to test and to monitor your app so that it will be high quality. So I talked about engineering managers and project managers sort of setting things up. You can imagine a world in which you've figured out what the top 5 features are. You've got 5 engineers on the team. You're going to line them all up, one on each of those features, and work towards getting them out to your customers. And so after some period of time, that's one week or one iteration or however you've got your team set up, you've got some work done. But you're still so far from actually delivering anything to anyone. And if you keep at this pace, after some time, eventually, all of this work will be done, and you'll ship the whole thing along with all of your bugs, right? What if instead we lined every engineer or developer on our team up behind just this one feature at a time? And we broke it down into small things that could be parallelized, things that could be tested. You could deliver something to customers much more quickly. And I'm not saying that you can deliver an entire feature in whatever your one cycle is, your 1 week or your one sprint, but I think you can deliver this one thing much more quickly than you could those 5 things. And in that process, so we're limiting work in progress by doing just one thing, and we're also identifying waste, right? When I said you'd have people waiting, or we're all waiting for CI. Well, that's a problem. Let's spend the time to make that faster so we don't waste time. We'll also have time to do things like manage technical debt in this area, right? Write tests for this code. If we're trying to move fast and get 5 things done, we might write a couple tests here and there. But if we're all focused on this one feature, we're really going to be paying attention to this area of code in ways that we wouldn't have otherwise. And if we waited until all of the features were actually done, those 5 features, we'd have all this work that was in progress, or all this thing that was partially done work that no customer ever saw until everything was done. So this plan gets things to customers faster, gets feedback on them faster, and I think is better for your customers. So can anyone relate to this particular GIF here, right? What's more interesting, what's more fun, to write your own code or to do someone else's code reviews, right? I'm going to present a controversial opinion here. I think code reviews should interrupt the work of other developers on your team. And why? Why do I think that? Well, code reviews should interrupt the work because the work that is ready for code review is that much closer to your customer, right? If I've been working on something, I'm coding for a couple hours and somebody comes along and says, hey, I have a code review. Their code is done, or mostly done, and mine is not. I'm not ready. Their code is closer to delivering the feature to a customer. And so it's more important. If we wait, then their work that they've done is waste. They're waiting, and it's waste. And what are they going to do when they're waiting for me to review their code? They're going to pick up something else. So now we have even more work in progress. Or they're going to go hang out on Twitter, right? So I think it's more efficient. Now this assumes that the work that you're doing is all of equal priority. Everything being equal. If something that I'm doing is an urgent fix, well, it's way more important than reviewing code for the next release. But controversial opinion. So I kind of see this happening out in the audience. I see some gasps of horror, but I also see a couple of people that are like, oh yeah, I kind of get it. It's some food for thought. So let's get a little more concrete and talk about actual tools that teams might use when they're building apps faster. So previously I said that the specific tools that you use are a small piece of the puzzle, and I think that's true. I have some recommendations, but it's more the concepts that are important for you to take away. So I talked about the Kanban and Lean principles that were important to me, and I'm going to show you how using certain types of tools allow you to reflect those principles. So you can eliminate waste by using something like Fastlane to automate the process of shipping your app. And you can get feedback loops. You can be more tightly in touch with your customers by doing percentage rollouts or alpha and beta rollouts. Building integrity in means actually just running the tests, and I'll talk about Fastlane, Firebase Test Lab as well. And how you can evolve through experimentation by actually monitoring your app when it's out in production so you can see the impact of your changes. So something that really sucks to hear is that because somebody is out of the office this week, we can't do the release. And why is that? Why can't we do that? Well, maybe I'm the only one with a password, or the keys are on my machine, right? This is the golden laptop, the only one that can push the app to production. But it doesn't have to be this way. It's hard, and I know it's hard because I've recently been there on this new team that I joined. You know, we're all waiting for this one person named David. Thank you, David. Waiting for him to do the release because we used his Apple developer account just to get it out. We just need to get that first version out. We didn't have our team account set up, and so we'll just use his. Well, now we've just used his, and he's the only one who can do this release, and he was sick. He had to take his dog to the vet, and we're waiting, right? And it doesn't have to be like that. So I think that shipping your app should be as easy as pushing a button, and there are tools that we can use to actually do that. So Fastlane is an open source tool that I worked on in the past that lets you automate all of the hard parts of shipping your app. It really works right into your workflow, so you can run it on your machine. You can run it on CI. It'll make the sort of automation, the dream of release automation come true. You can generate all of your screenshots, right? That's something that takes a lot of time. Sometimes we just skip it because it's hard, even though we change something. And the screenshots in the App Store or Google Play don't really reflect what our app looks like right now, but man, it's a pain to make new screenshots for all the different languages and screen sizes, so I'll just skip it. If you could automate that, you wouldn't have to spend the time doing that. And you can automate actually publishing your app into production or into beta. And if pushing your app to beta was easier, you might actually do that more often. You could use Fastlane to manage code signing and uploading your actual binary to all the places it needs to be. And this is what the configuration would look like. It's pretty straightforward to upload an app to beta or into the Play Store or Google Play, or App Store or Google Play. It just does all the work, right? You increment the build number, you actually build the thing, you upload it, get your screenshots, you build it, you upload it, and then you can even notify your team on Slack or however your team communicates, integrate it right into your workflow. So we know that testing is important. There are a lot of good talks out there about tests. This is not about writing tests. I'm not the foremost expert in writing tests, but I do think that running the tests is really important. Recently on our team, we've run into the scenario where our build machines got out of sync with the version of Xcode and Swift that we were using, and we didn't have CI. That was a little rough. So we were relying on developers to test on their laptops as part of their workflow. That wasn't really happening. And we couldn't test on CI. And we don't have any users yet. So we were in this really tough situation where we were building things without ever actually testing them. So one little life hack that I added for the team was to use a pre-commit hook. So in lieu of CI, this forces developers on the team to actually run the tests before they can commit any code. It's been pretty helpful so far. The bit at the top just makes sure that the changes that you have staged are actually for our iOS project. I mentioned that we're working on this project that has this other stuff. We're using a mono repo, and so we have C and Python tools and all kinds of things in the same repo, so we don't want to burden everyone else with running the iOS tests when they're making some other kind of change. And then just run the tests at every commit. And if it fails, it won't allow you to commit the code, which is super helpful. Tests are an important part of the lifecycle, and I believe that all code in master should be ready to ship. That's how we do things. That's how we get builds out faster. You can't have someone saying, oh, actually, that's not ready. That's not quite ready for production yet. If it's in master, it should be ready to go. And so this is one thing that will help ensure that. Firebase Test Lab is another tool that you can use for testing your app in different ways. So it's cloud-based testing infrastructure. You can test on real devices or on simulators or emulators for Android and iOS. And you can test on all different OS versions and different languages, and you can see the results of the tests on the web. You can use your own instrumentation tests, or you can use what's called the robocrawler. And so you just upload your app with no tests at all, and the crawler will poke through your app, clicking on every buttons and going through the menu and trying to navigate. You can even provide a login if the majority of your app is behind authentication, and it will go through looking for crashes and taking screenshots and videos along the way. So it's a freebie, right? You can just upload your app once you've built it. You could integrate this into your CI process, and every build would go through and take screenshots, crawling through your app. And so once you've uploaded it, you can see things like, here are all the versions that it ran on, which is great because I don't happen to have half of those kinds of iPhones in our little test lab that we have in the office. You've got some devices for testing on, but not all of these. And so it's a super way to get more test coverage for free, automate it, kind of push it out into the cloud, let that happen while you're doing something else. So that's testing on your laptop, testing in CI. What about testing on your users in production? It's another way to test. So you can use something like a beta distribution strategy. So you can send out pre-release builds and just test on your existing customers. If they're people that you know or people who have signed up and are willing to give you feedback, this builds in your feedback loop. So you can understand if the things that you're building, not only do they work, but are they valuable? Are people using them? Do you ship something out and people are like, oh, I didn't even know that was in the app. I didn't click on that. It didn't seem interesting. So these folks are a really good source of information, and you can use TestFlight or Google Play or services like Beta by Crashlytics or Hockey. Any particular, it doesn't matter what service you're using. The idea is to get pre-release versions of your app out there and test on those people who are willing to use it. Those could be just everyone inside of your organization, right? Your whole company might be a great test bed for new versions of your app, or friends and family. And another way to test on your real production users is to use staged or phased rollouts so that you can find issues that you might not have caught in beta testing, but you can also see how features are being adopted by existing customers. It's important to use something to track your metrics, to keep an eye on your app while you're doing these rollouts, so something like Crashlytics, some kind of crash reporting, or just usage analytics of any kind, so that you can see, oh, after I ship this 5% rollout, I'm seeing a decrease in sales or conversions or whatever it is, whatever important metrics are in your app, or I'm seeing these brand new crashes. Let me fix those before this hits 100% of my users and suddenly we can't make any money because the app isn't working. Remote config, or feature flags is more of a generic term for it, is another way to test on your users. And I think this is my favorite over the others. So if you're in a cadence of shipping your app every week or every 2 weeks, you can ship out features dark, put them behind a flag, and then flip them on when you're actually ready to test them, rather than waiting for that overhead of the release. And let's see. And you can also turn them off when things get ugly. If you've realized that, this feature I shipped is causing some problems, you can just switch the features off rather than having to roll a whole new version of your app out there. Just as an example of some remote config that I had set up. So 10% of iOS users would see this is an awesome app on the home screen instead of this is a great app. And then I could look in my metrics and see if there's any difference in the behavior between those users. If they think it's awesome, are they going to buy more things, or are they going to play more games? And in this case, I'm going to turn on this shiny feature for Android users. And like I said, if it goes poorly, I can just go turn it off. And Firebase Remote Config has a lot of great ways you can sort of slice and dice your users, the segments of your users. So I can look at people's operating system. You can look at other user properties that you've set, people who buy things or versus people who don't buy things, language, all sorts of different user properties, and decide who gets it. Or just a random percentage if you really just want to test something. And the app side code looks like you might imagine, right? You write both branches of the code, do this or do that, and you install an SDK into the app. And based on the parameters that come back, you change the behavior in your app. I talked a little bit about metrics, but it's hard to know if the changes that you're making for a particular feature matter to your users unless you're actually monitoring their behavior, right? Are you making sure the app is not crashing under that new code? And are your users still engaged, retained? Are you making money the way that you had in previous versions? Right? If you're not paying attention to those things, then it doesn't really matter. You could ship your app with all of the bugs and problems in it. If you're not paying attention to the metrics, then the changes you make don't matter. So those are some tools. We'll step back a little bit and start to talk about the team again, and how the process can deliver value to customers more quickly. So when we think about progress, we imagine getting things done, and it can be a long-term goal, right? That V1, that's progress. Like we're getting stuff done. But these big wins are great, but they're rare, right? We don't get these awesome life-changing milestones all that often. The good news is that even small wins, tiny moments of success, can impact people's happiness tremendously. So there's this book called The Progress Principle by Teresa Amabile and her husband, Stephen Kramer. And they wrote this book and also this article called The Power of Small Wins, which was published in the Harvard Business Review. And they explain about studies that they did on people. They had people journal their daily life. It was something like 12,000 journal entries. And it was, what happened that day and how did you feel about it? And what they discovered is that even on days that were the most stressful, because they had so much to do, that if they got something done, that they were happier. And that happiness from that progress impacted how they felt the days after that as well. The follow-on days, even these tiny wins, these small wins, made people happier than just, I didn't have a bad day. And the inverse is true as well. That negative things that happen in people's lives impacted them, or happened in their work lives, impacted them for days beyond. But the wins, the positive things that happened, lasted longer than the negative things. So this is like real science. Like they went out and studied people's behavior and emotions in the workplace. They published something like 100 articles on this topic. And there's a lot of meaningful quotes in this article, but just making progress towards meaningful work is the thing that made people the happiest. And when they were happy, they worked harder. Okay? So what is meaningful work in terms of shipping an app, right? Is what I'm working on important to my customers? Are they gonna love it? Am I excited to deliver this thing to somebody? That's meaningful work. And because people are making this progress and they want to ship these features more quickly, we're actually getting more work out of people, out of engineers on the team because they're doing work. So if we look back at this V1, if we look back at this team that couldn't see the top from where they were, how can we change their perspective so that they feel like they're making progress towards meaningful stuff? Well, by creating milestones, right? Some small thing along the way. People are going to see, they can see that 0.1, they can see it, they understand why they're doing it, they understand that they're making progress towards it, and they're going to move faster. And so you could actually carry this team all the way to the V1 more quickly by having them understand the work that they're doing along the way and why it's important. It makes them happier, and they'll move faster that way. Another way to think about it is, would you rather have a little party every Friday or a once a year, big bash bender that you might not even remember, right? I'd rather go out every Friday and enjoy my time, enjoy reflecting back on my week, rather than waiting for an entire year to go by before I could celebrate. So I think this is a life hack. I think you can use this progress principle on yourself to increase your own happiness and productivity, whether it's at work or any other place in your life, by just thinking about what's a small, meaningful goal, something that I can do right now that will make me feel like I have progress. And then I'll be happier once I get there. And once I get there, I'll work harder. And I'll be happier and I'll work harder. You can sort of like make this snowball effect to build motivation in yourself as well. So we talked about how tools can eliminate waste and increase happiness in your developer team at the same time, but the last piece of the puzzle, the reason that we're all here is our customers, right? We're not in the business of building apps for ourselves. We're doing this for people who use them. In the book, The Lean Startup by Eric Rice, he talks about this build, measure, learn cycle. And generally, this is thought of as iterating based on learning from your customers. You have to ship things to people in order to learn from them, though. And so, what we think we're going to make for our V1 when we thought about that peak, it turns out if we actually ship to customers on each of those little milestones, we're going to learn things from them, and the end result, the end product, is going to be quite different from what we set out to build without learning anything from customers in between. At each phase of building, there's something that we can learn. So when we're building and testing, we can measure the quality of the app and decide if we're proud of it before we ship it out, and if not, we'll go back to building. When we're in usability or beta testing, we can decide if does this meet our customers' expectations? Are we managing their emotions? Are they excited? If they're not, we can go back to designing the app. And when we've shipped the app, we can learn through metrics, like I spoke about before, and decide if this version or this feature is improving the app for our customers. Are they doing the things that we want them to do, which is buy more, use it more, retention and engagement? If not, we can go back to prioritizing and designing the app. So this is that build, measure, learn cycle on a bigger scale. So the best thing about software is we can make updates all the time, every month or every day if we want to. And to me, what that means is that it's better for us to ship a minimum viable product, the smaller thing, rather than the whole thing. And what this picture Henrik Nyberg is the author of a book called Lean from the Trenches, and also some really great articles. In one of them, he describes, if you're trying to ship a car, right? We're trying to build the app. This is the ultimate goal, is this car at the end. What's better to do? Should we send a customer one wheel at a time? No, that has no value. It's not meaningful to them. They wouldn't want it anyway. It's better to understand their problem, which for these people is just getting from point A to point B. So first we give them a skateboard, which I'm not really psyched about, but it does get them from here to there. And then a scooter, and then a bicycle, and they're like, okay, yeah, this improves my life. This gets me from where I need to go. Motorcycle, they're pretty happy about. And in the end, we end up building this convertible car because turns out they like the feeling of the wind blowing through their hair, which we wouldn't have discovered if we were just shipping pieces of the car that delivered no value to them at any time. We were going to build that hardtop. That's what we thought they wanted. That's what we would have delivered ultimately. But we learned through experimentation that really what they wanted was that convertible. It solved all of their problems and got them something along the way, rather than just waiting until the end to get there. So a final word about software launches. I said at the beginning that we can't estimate a thing, right? We cannot estimate how long it's going to take to ship things. So software development can either be date-driven or feature-driven, but I don't think it can be both. When developers are empowered, we can decide when the right time to ship is. And so if you prepare for this huge release on December 24th with lots of presents, and you miss that date because it was harder than we expected, is it still Christmas by the time we get it out in July? I don't think so. I think people would have been happier if we shipped them one little gift on the evening of, December 24th to let them know we were still thinking about them and that we're making some progress, not waiting until July. Is it still Christmas? I don't know. I think it's not, but it's up for you to decide how you're going to ship your app and manage your features. So I hope that talking about different processes that teams can use and certain tools, whether they're the right specific tools for you or not, the concepts, helps give you some ideas on how to make your customers happy and your team happy, and ship apps faster. After my talk, I'll publish a link to the slides, and these are some of the resources, some of the books and articles that I mentioned, which are super helpful, have been meaningful to me in my career. So, thank you.